So let's start with this public debriefing of BEREC's fourth plenary meeting that took place in Copenhagen next week. Last week, thank you very much. So you see we are sharing a microphone with Johannes Gungl because he will be the chairman of BEREC next year, and so this public debriefing is also the occasion to make concrete this handover, let's say. So on the substance, one of the main pieces of today will be the implementation report on net neutrality rules over Europe from 1 year. But I will also take the opportunity of this meeting to, let's say, wrap up a little bit the past year, 2017. And Johannes Gungl will present next year's works program and priority. So, as you can see, we are a comprehensive team with people coming from RCEP, RTR, the BEREC office, but also the co-chairs of the expert working group we will debrief about. So the main outcomes from the last plenary, starting from the three, let's say, pillars of this year. You can see them in a nutshell here, and I will start with. Yeah. With the question of enhancing connectivity that have been, one of the priority of this year. Once again, for regulators, connectivity is a big issue, and we consider that, competition is a very important tool, but it's still only a tool, and the end game for everybody is connectivity. So from this year, the main outputs were contribution from BEREC to the Roam Like at Home political decisions, a report about how to cover challenge areas with mobile networks, and a report about monitoring mobile coverage. The idea behind this works that we have been doing this year regarding mobile is that it is true that BEREC and regulators have been very much focused on fixed networks in the past years, because obviously in the toolbox of regulators, access regulation is something very important, but we also know that for people, mobile are becoming the most important network to access to the internet, so we wanted also to enlarge a little bit our works to this. So at this plenary, more specifically, we have adopted non-residential market indicators, a report regarding this for feeding the EC digital scoreboard. A report also on the broadband cost reduction directive and how it has been implemented over Europe. And also a report about state aid funded infrastructure. And last, I will come back on our works regarding a mobile issue. And now I take the floor to Jonathan Duggan. Please, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sébastien. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jonathan Duggan. I'm an economist at ComReg, the Irish National Regulatory Authority, and I'm co-chair of the BEREC Benchmarking Expert Working Group. The objective of the Benchmarking Expert Working Group is to develop and improve the benchmarking of national data that can be useful for the monitoring of the evolution and harmonisation of electronic communications markets at the retail and wholesale level. The Benchmarking Expert Working Group is committed to enhancing the quality of statistical and census data produced by NRAs by closely following market developments. Now, this report was adopted at the plenary, as Sébastien said, and essentially the work involved BEREC collaborating with the Commission, and the output is based on a survey of what data NRAs collect on the non-residential market. We're proposing a set of indicators which the Commission will start collecting data on in order to annually benchmark from 2018. So the current availability of statistical information on the business market at the European level is relatively limited, and therefore it does not allow for a robust assessment of the evolution of this market. Most of the currently available data comes from surveys carried out by operators. In addition, each year Eurostat circulates a questionnaire to those companies that employ at least 10 people, which focuses on the internet usage by companies. This information is useful, but it provides no indication about the evolution of the business market. So to the purpose of the project, there was, as I said, there's a lack of data on this sector collected across Europe, and we're proposing, as you'll see on the next slide, a set of 8 indicators for the Commission to collect from next year. One of the main points of debate in the development of the report was with respect to how to define the non-residential market. And this was because some NRAs go with a strictly business definition, and some bring other types of organizations like non-governmental organizations into their definitions. So we proposed the following definition as mentioned, on the previous slide. And the definition is: a non-residential customer primarily uses an electronic communication service for performing economic activities. Non-residential customers include businesses in the strictest sense, entrepreneurs or self-employed individuals, non-governmental organizations, and public or state sector bodies. And in addition to this definition, we've provided some guidance for NRAs, which says that NRAs may consider allowing operators to use criteria equivalent to this definition and should settle in their own terms on how to check these criteria. So, sorry, that was on the first slide. So, and then you see here the list of 8 indicators. Now, the Commission was mostly interested in what we're kind of terming as forward-looking indicators. So, indicators that would help to feed into the 2025 Gigabit Society initiative and measure the market for that initiative. So what you see is on the fixed side, you have 4 indicators, and they are the total number of non-residential broadband internet access, the number of non-residential broadband internet access below and above or equal to 30 megabits per second, and revenues from non-residential broadband internet access. And currently, 24 NRAs collect data on the first indicator for fixed, and then 19 NRAs collect data for the other 3 indicators on the fixed side. For mobile, the indicators are the number of non-residential M2M SIM cards, number of active non-residential mobile broadband users, non-residential mobile data volumes, and total non-residential mobile revenues. And then, on average, we have 14 NRAs collecting that data for those indicators. And that's it. We'll work with the Commission on an ongoing basis to review these indicators and how the data collection is going, and to see if the data set is robust based on the first round of data collection in 2018, and we'll try to improve that going forward. And we're also going to work internally in BEREC on more traditional indicators that the Commission were, let's say, found less appropriate for collecting with respect to the Gigabit Society. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Let me tell you that this question has raised discussions between regulators, because our starting point is really not the same in any country, but we really wanted to contribute to the Commission's work and to the digital scoreboard. So it's a step-by-step work, but still we want to have a clear contribution to that workflow. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. And now I give the floor to Daniel Miara from ARCEP about the implementation of the so-called BB cost directive. So it's the directive that gives to telecom operator an access to civil engineering and facilities coming from any utility. Daniel.
Thank you, Sébastien. Good morning. So as Sébastien just recalled, the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive was adopted by the EU in May 2014 with the aim to facilitate the rollout of high-speed networks. And as you know also, the Member States had the obligation to apply the measures contained in the directive by the 1st of July 2016. So about a year and a half later, BEREC found that it was a good idea to, let's say, to get a deeper insight in the implementation of this directive and to, let's say, foster the exchanges of experiences between NRAs. So the focus of the report that is published today is on the competencies entrusted to NRAs and how they have implemented it. In particular, the competencies entrusted to NRAs as dispute settlement bodies. In the European Union, in 23 member states, it is the NRA which are in charge of settling the disputes that may arise between, for instance, an energy network operator and the telecom operator if the last one wants to access to its network. What we see so far is it's been a relatively brief time since the directive fully entered into force, so we have so far a limited number of cases. We have had 106 disputes so far, but the vast majority of them were in Poland and were linked to access to in-building infrastructure. What we see in most cases from the experience of NRAs is that the telecom and operator and the infrastructure provider are usually able to find an agreement without the need to actually put a dispute settlement before the NRA. So in most cases, they can find an agreement, let's say, on a commercial basis. The report also shows that probably the most tricky issue that the NRA have to face in the implementation of this directive is the question of the price of access to the physical infrastructure, which is a topic on which BEREC will continue to work last year. Another report, which is going to be published today as well, is a report on state aid, and in particular on the NRA's role regarding access conditions to state aid infrastructures. What we see from this report is that in practice, a lot of NRAs are competent regarding access condition to state aid infrastructures, but their competencies are quite diverse in the EU. It can be through the establishment of guidelines on access condition to state aid projects. It can also be advice granted to the competent authorities. In some countries, the NRAs are competent to define the pricing methods, and in many member states as well, they are competent to settle disputes. What we see is that access products are usually very similar to the ones that are imposed in the ex-ante regulation. So access to state aid projects will usually be granted on really similar conditions to the one imposed, for instance, under the significant market power regulation. And finally, a third project linked to this connectivity goal on which BEREC has been working this year, which has to do with mobile coverage. So this report is not published today, but it will be published in a few weeks. As mentioned earlier, BEREC has been working closely with the RSPG on this report, which aims to present and analyze several initiatives to provide connectivity in what we have called challenged areas. So this can be, of course, rural areas, which are generally considered as less profitable, but it can also be transport, such as subway or train, which represent a specific challenge for operators to cover. What we see is that there is obviously an increasing demand from the end user to obtain a satisfactory coverage of those challenge areas, and this report is therefore going to be a basis to help regulators and other public authorities to tackle the issue. So the process is now in the process. The report, is in the process of being adopted by both BEREC and RSPG, and it should be published in the beginning of January. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. So after this first pillar regarding connectivity issue, let's move to the second one, which is about safeguarding an open environment, which is actually an issue that is very much in the spotlight, and not necessarily in Europe, but in other places in the world. And I'm sure this is a topic on which we will have interesting questions to discuss today. So just to wrap up a little bit about what happened this year about this. So first, we took these very important decisions to develop a common measurement tool for net neutrality in an opt-in manner. So, I mean, for BEREC, it's not only a sign of real commitment about this question of net neutrality, but it is also a good illustration of what is BEREC. BEREC is, as I say frequently, like a cooperative of farmers, you know, that put forces together to solve problems, and measuring net neutrality is a quite important challenge. So that is why we decided to solve it together. We will issue this report today about 1 year of implementation of net neutrality rules in Europe. As you will see, this is a first report, and I really ask people to look at BEREC's and NRAs work about net neutrality in the long run, because it will be, we hope, a long story in Europe about protecting net neutrality, so it is a first step. We have also issued a report about the new bottlenecks that we can identify in the digital ecosystem, about content and devices and their impact on the electronic communication market. And you know that this will be one of our 5 strategic priorities for the next 3 years, to look at more broadly about the bottlenecks in the digital ecosystem. We also had good cooperations this year regarding net neutrality, because it's really interesting to see around the world, I mean, between democracies, how net neutrality is tackled. And there is no one definition of net neutrality around the world, and there is no one way to protect it. And so we have launched good cooperations with TRI, the Indian regulator. You know that we organized this year a study trip with the mini board of BEREC in India, and we had last week cooperations between experts, as TRI has issued a report proposals about net neutrality, and well, I'm spoiling everything, so we'll come back to this. And we had also a cooperation with other regional cooperation body with a clear statement in Cascais in June about our strong commitment in net neutrality. Having said that, I propose we get into the main issues of the last plenary, and I give the floor to Michel. Michel, you have it.
Thanks, Sébastien. There it is. Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Michiel van Dijk. I work at ACM, and I spent quite some time as co-chair of the BEREC Net Neutrality Working Group. And I do that together with Frode Sørensen from Norway. And I'd like to speak about 3 things today. We'll start with the Net Neutrality Supervision report, and then I think the main piece is the implementation report. And I think it's also interesting, as Sébastien said, it is work in progress, so it's interesting to have a look at next year. That will be point 3. There we are. Yes. So the supervision report is a report collecting ways for NRAs to supervise and enforce the net neutrality rules. In order to make this report, we did not just look at at information available amongst the NRAs, but we also had a look at information from outside the EU. And I think a centerpiece of this report is a practical format to apply as a questionnaire by NRAs to investigate technical and commercial practices. The idea is that these tools described in the report are easy to adapt for specific situations that are relevant for NRAs. Not all NRAs have the same legal situation, have the same markets, are busy with the same things, because not in each country the same subjects are relevant. So it's good to be able to adapt. But the general message is that we think it is useful to have coordinated use of this template. This picture shows the three main ingredients we used to make this report. We had stakeholder dialogues at the beginning of the year. We took note, of course, of our own commissioned report of the BEREC commissioned report to Analysis Mason about supervision and net neutrality in outside the EU, so that contain chapters on US, Chile, and India. And we, of course, also used this work we presented to you last plenary about common methodologies to measure or investigate quality of service. So this is what leads to this report. On the next slide, I won't read all the items, but these are subjects you can think of that can be addressed. I put them in three categories. Of course, there are general questions that can be interesting. Commercial practices, we'll come back to that later, I guess, today, but it can be interesting to have a structured way to investigate these. And there are many technical practices that can be investigated by using the template. So this is what I wanted to share on the report. I think the next slide is an intermediate slide as well. I start this report off with a picture as well to describe what we did in this first year's report. We had an internal questionnaire which will be published with this report, because it is the main structure of the report. We built this questionnaire according to the structure of the regulation. So it starts with Article 3 and then Article 4, 5, and 6. In subsequent parts taken separate. This questionnaire was launched in the middle of the year, and we got answers to this questionnaire from the NRAs with the time scope of the first year of applying the regulation. So that was until the 30th of April, if I'm correct, of this year. This mainly focuses on measures and strategic decisions taken by NRAs in implementing the regulation. And we added to this national cases as examples to illustrate what is happening in NRAs and on the markets of the markets of the countries. And we took these cases from our own internal database, which is continuously supplemented. And of course, cases evolve from sometimes being secret at the beginning to informal, formal, and then decisions are taken. And although it's the first year, we're starting to see the first court cases. So this is the main structure. Now, what is in the report? Of course, you can see that for yourself after the presentation, but I focus on Article 3 and 4 of the regulation in this part. Article 3 is, of course, about the main rights for end users and traffic management. If you want to summarize it very shortly, we see that all NRAs monitor commercial and technical practices. 25 NRAs have identified zero rating cases. Many of them are about music or social networking. We see that there are not so many traffic management practices formally assessed, but we've seen an increase in this in the last weeks, let's say it like that. And we see that specialized services are being monitored by some NRAs. So this is not the core part of the work being done at the moment. on the next slide. We described some cases on end-user rights. I think a lot of interest will be there for commercial practices, and then a specific type of it called zero rating. We see that these practices are sometimes applied in combination with traffic management, and sometimes they are not. And I think concerning the cases where there's no traffic management, we describe it here as pure zero rating. We've included a few descriptions of these. I think you are aware of some offers in the market. And we see that the approaches taken by NRAs to assess them are sometimes slightly different, but they have to deal with different markets and I think most importantly with different propositions. As you know, some propositions consist of one element, one service, or one type of services, which is already a big difference. And other propositions consist of passes or groups of apps. And of course, this requires a different analysis. I think it's interesting to note that until now we have not seen formal intervention on pure zero rating cases. Now, when we speak of traffic management combined with zero rating, we also included some case descriptions. And there, I think we see a leniency towards interventions, and these are so far, I think, quite similar. No? Is there already more cases on end-user rights? Just a short overview of the maybe lighter touch cases. We've seen some interventions on end-user equipment, including pursuance of a decision of consumers to decide whether they can use tethering or not. So that's basically using the connection of your mobile phone in order to connect your laptop over the connection of your mobile phone. There were some interventions, but sometimes there were also no intervention. For example, in the case of a 4G only subscription requiring a 4G phone, which happened to be in the Netherlands. We've seen cases where there was zero rating after the data cap has been reached, and there we've seen quite some interventions. I think that shows a similar approach. Yeah, and we've seen more cases on zero rating even, and there we have not seen formal interventions. I think we've noted that the openness or the lack of openness in the zero rating program is that draws attention by the NRAs. And I think last but not least on this list there are cases of video throttling. So that's a type of traffic management where the video traffic is being slowed down or degraded, and there we see interventions by NRAs. So how do we look at this picture? I think overall we can say that the regulation and the guidelines have been implemented by NRAs. I think we've also noticed, our experience is that the guidelines are well suited for analyzing cases. And this is an interim analysis or conclusion, if you like. Because we are at an early stage, we see now that NRAs are gaining speed. This results in formal or informal interventions, or no interventions, of course. And I think the interesting part is, of course, the next phase when decisions will be decided upon by courts. And we've not entered this phase yet. On pure zero rating, we see that national circumstances are really an important feature in how this is done. These are really different, as for example, the mobile markets are quite different, so that already sets a different competitive scene. So we see completely different offers on different markets, and therefore we see a different approach sometimes to zero rating. When we look at traffic management, we see a more coherent application, I think. also in relation to zero rating. And then I move to Article 4, which is about transparency on contractual terms. This transparency is required about mainly the quality of the broadband connection. There we see that NRAs are formally or informally active in asking information by ISPs. We see market surveillance by NRAs, either by looking at the websites or by asking ISPs. We also see that most NRAs are quite active in using reports and complaints of end users. Now we've seen 16 NRAs preparing national specifications of different types of speeds. These are the maximum normally available and the minimum speed used in the Article 4 of the regulation. We also see a significant number of countries where the ISPs have not included the speed information or the speed definitions in the contracts. So that's, I think, work in progress, to be honest. And then, of course, a majority of NRAs is monitoring complaints and performance of internet access services. And of course, this relates also to the work we did last plenary about making the decision Sébastien already referred to start developing a BEREC tool. So the findings on, or our findings on this, I already said, it's work in progress to fully implement this. We see different NRAs have different approaches. That's also not only related to different market situations. In some markets, there's less interest for measuring the actual speeds. In other markets, it's of high importance. We also see that national contract and consumer law are different, so that results in different implementation of these speeds. And some NRAs have the task to be more active on, for example, setting minimum quality of service standards, and some NRAs do not have these obligations. So this is the implementation report. I think we'll get back to that later. But for now, a few slides on, or...
Yeah. Just to make, thank you very much, Michel. Just before to go to the next point, I just wanted, thank you very much, Michel, to wrap up a little bit about this implementation report, because when I read the press, I see some misunderstanding about what we are doing in BEREC. So I just wanted to make several points clear. This report is really essential in our work regarding net neutrality, and you know that the directive or regulation, they didn't ask us to report like this. So we do it spontaneously because we think it makes sense. And I hope you will see it as a real commitment of BEREC regarding net neutrality. What I would like to make clear about how net neutrality is implemented in Europe is the following. So the legislator, which is defining the net neutrality rules, it's the legislator, not the regulator, decided not to impose an ex-ante control on operators, and in particular on their offers that might infringe net neutrality. So, for example, net neutrality offers. So there is no a priori agreement by regulators about the offers that are on the table. So the fact an offer appears on the market does not mean that this offer is legal. I really would like to insist on that. Each offer is appreciated by each NRA on a case-by-case analysis. This allows the NRA to thoroughly assess the offer to determine whether or not, in the local circumstances, the offer would or not limit the rights of end user to access and distribute information and on content of their choice. And sometimes this can call for in-depth analysis So these sometimes take time. So when you see an offer that is commercially on the table, it doesn't mean that it's legal. One day, maybe one regulator will consider that it's an infringement to the net neutrality rule. Of course, this will take time to build a substantial case law, but this is necessary because there are, let's say, 50 shades of zero rating, sorry for that, and there is a need for this case-by-case assessment. The same is true for many other fields of EU law. I mean, look at competition law. I mean, competition law is ex post appreciation and analysis by 28 national authorities plus the European Commission. And okay, it has taken time to have a competition law that delivered a comprehensive jurisprudence, but this will work like this regarding zero rating and net neutrality in Europe. So in particular, this means that each offer might treat it differently depending on the conditions on the market in which it appears. And in the end, this means that in theory, an offer might be accepted in one country, might not be in another, because national circumstances could be different. I know this is probably ugly in your eyes, but this is what have been decided by the legislator to have an analysis on national circumstances. So, in the end, I would like also to insist on the fact that all the decisions that will be taken by national regulators will be possibly challenged and finally discussed at the same Court of Justice, which is the European Court of Justice. So we have a strong set of rules that applies throughout Europe. All in all, what I really would like to insist on is that the strengths of Europe regarding telecom regulation and net neutrality rules is that we have a robust and long-term framework. So if we compare us to other continents, the rules are not changing every 2 years about net neutrality. So we have a regulation for a long time, and this regulation will give us all the time necessary to build this long-term jurisprudence, as I mentioned. We have been regulating telecom market to foster and develop competition during 20 years. We are regulating roaming from more than 10 years. Sorry? 2007, so yeah, more than 10 years. And we are regulating net neutrality for 1 year and a half. So it's the beginning of the story. We are committed, okay? But please don't go too far in analyzing what we are doing. It's really the beginning of the story, and we are totally committed to protect an open internet, to protect net neutrality in Europe. Thank you for your attention, and now I propose to move to the next point, which is the ongoing activity about net neutrality. Michel.
Thanks for the intermediate. Yeah, I think it's a nice bridge to go to, let me present what we do next year. On a day-to-day basis, we exchange information and use a database to do this. We exchange analysis in the drafters team of the working group. Sometimes these analyses are about specific cases. Sometimes they are about more general questions. And to be honest, sometimes there are good discussions. And sometimes we indeed all agree at once. Now, although the regulation, I think as well, is there to stay, it contains an evaluation clause. This is a political evaluation that is registered for the beginning of 2019. And in order to be able to share our experience with the European Commission that has to initiate this evaluation, we will start a work program, a project next year, and that starts off with a consultation, a public consultation with questions to gather input, so everybody can share their ideas about how we have implemented the regulation with us. So we will not be having a consultation about the entire regulation, but about our way of dealing with the regulation, because we are responsible for that. And that should result in an opinion of BEREC at the end of the year, just in time for the Commission to digest before having to react officially on the evaluation. And then, of course, next year we will continue with the procurement of the net neutrality measurement tool. We're working on the tender documentation now, mainly done by BEREC office. And we aim to launch this tender in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter. That should result in a contract. Of course, European public procurement rules require us to take time. So this contract will probably be signed after summer or around summer. And then, of course, we will continue to cooperate with regional counterparts, as it says on the slides, which basically means other NRAs or regulators. Now, on the next slide, you'll find a short flashback to the beginning of the year, where the mini-BOR went on a study trip to India, and there the subject was discussed of net neutrality with the TRI, the Indian regulator. Just 2 weeks ago, the working group had a video conference with TRI. I found it very useful personally. And I think you can see that there are quite some similarities between the Indian and the European approach, although these are, of course, in different settings. And I think this work will continue next year. And then we are currently considering a memorandum of understanding with TRI about net neutrality. I think that's my part.
Thank you, Michel. And once again, I think the cooperation mechanism that have underlined Michel are, I mean, this is a spontaneous move from BEREC, because we really want to have the most consistent approach regarding net neutrality rules. And I mean, there are several offers today by same pan-European operators that are delivering more or less the same offer over Europe, and all NRAs that are concerned by this offer are working together to try to have the most consistent approach to analyze this offer. So the last pillar of this year was about reinventing BEREC from within. And I try to summarize it in 3 words that I shared with the teams at the beginning of this year about how we wanted to do so. So it's about share, dare, and care. You know, this is a kind of management approach. We wanted this year to share with the ecosystem. About how we can see the future, and for instance, we organized a workshop on the Internet of Things in the beginning of this year, and I think it was fruitful, because the conclusion was more or less that no specific regulation is necessarily needed for the Internet of Things, but we say that after a comprehensive report, and I think this is useful to avoid maybe uncontrolled regulatory approach on this kind of question. As I mentioned, we had this intention to really share our views between regulators about net neutrality cases. There is about sometimes taking risks. I'm not talking about the review here, but about how we want to build our own agenda for the future. And so we adopted this year a quite ambitious, I would say, strategic midterm position with 5 priorities for the 3 next year, with important topics like 5G, and Johannes Gungl will come back on this. And care, because if we want to work together and if we want to take risks, we have some time to take care of one another. And I hope that the development of the collaboration tool I mentioned is a good illustration on that. And now it's time to get to our next point, which is the next year work program. And I'm happy to give the floor to Johannes Gungl.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. Good morning from my side. I just want to introduce to you the now finally adopted work program for 2018. I mean, the process is quite lengthy. We start early in the year to gather topics and themes for the coming year. We have started in spring already. We have in the meantime, after the third plenary, made a public consultation. Thank you very much for your input. I will come to that later. And now in the fourth plenary, we have adopted the work program for 2018. Let me put this work program a little bit into perspective, into a context. As Sébastien has mentioned, we have also adopted a midterm strategy for the coming 3 years, 2018 to 2020. And this work program for next year is based upon this midterm strategy. We take this midterm strategy very seriously, and we have adopted work items on each and every of these strategic priorities, which are responding to connectivity challenges and to new conditions for access to high-speed networks, high-capacity networks. So this is one of our strategic priority. The next one is monitoring potential bottlenecks in the distribution of digital services. Next one, enabling 5G and promoting innovation in network technologies, fostering a consistent approach of the net neutrality principles, and last but not least, exploring new ways to boost consumer empowerment. In addition to that, we have, of course, a growing number of mandatory work to do, benchmarking and reports for the EU Commission that we do every year. And what we have in particular agreed in the midterm strategy is that we want to enhance our stakeholder engagement. And I will, you can see it later that we take this also very seriously, and we try to put more emphasis on that. So this is the context. We have the strategic priorities as a basis for this work program, and we have received during the public consultation that ran from the 11th of October to November 8th, 9 inputs from BOEC, Digital Europe, ECTA, EOLO. EOLO is an Italian fixed wireless access provider, from ETNO, FTTH Council Europe, GSMA, Mobile and Wireless Forum, and MVNO Europe. Once again, thank you very much for your input. This is extremely important for us because we want to avoid that we live in a kind of a regulator's bubble. This for us is always the reality check which shows us whether we are tackling the right topics. The result of the public consultation was that overall we received support for the topics in the BEREC work program 2018. There were some remarks whether or not the 3 overarching principles from the midterm strategy are still valid. These overarching principles are promoting competition and investment, promoting the internal market, and empowering end users. And I can say that, of course, these 3 overarching principles are still in force and valid, and we have clarified that in the work program in the introductory section. Some of the comments we received asked for more transparency and involvement in the BEREC work. We can gladly say that we have taken that on board. We will have 2 additional public consultations next year, which gives us altogether 10 public consultations next year, which is a record number in the history of BEREC. So I can proudly say that we really take stakeholder engagement seriously. And we will do these public consultations on the net neutrality input to an evaluation and on the work on access to physical infrastructure in market analysis. On the first one, on the net neutrality input to an evaluation, I want, as Michel has already pointed out, for Plenary 4 next year, we have planned to publish the evaluation on our end on net neutrality rules. And this will be an input to the evaluation that the European Commission has to do until end of April 2019. And we have started already a dialogue with some stakeholders, and we will continue to do so. What I would like to see, and this is a call upon all of you, it is crucial for this evaluation that you can provide concrete input, concrete use cases for 5G, because the goal for this evaluation is to identify and maybe remove hurdles for a quick rollout of 5G. That means that we want to look whether the current net neutrality rules are in any contradiction to features or the standard on 5G. So, and what we need for this evaluation is that we get concrete use cases from the industry that we can evaluate in our report. We have also received proposal for an additional topic on harmonized BEREC cooperation regarding Article 28, Section 2 of the Universal Service Directive. We have decided to not take this comment on board because we have recently adopted an internal report regarding this topic. So, summarizing the work for next year, there are mainly three focus areas we will tackle. Number one is 5G. As I mentioned before, we want to, at an early stage, identify and remove barriers for a quick and smooth rollout of 5G in Europe. I think this is the goal of every single NRA across Europe, and BEREC wants to support these efforts done by the national regulatory authorities. We want to have a very consistent deployment across Europe that, in particular, the industry that is operating across the continent has the same conditions in all the member states. And we will, of course, closely cooperate with other institutions, European bodies, on this topic. For instance, we will have a closer cooperation, and we are doing more and more work together, for instance, with the RSPG, which I think is of crucial importance to the industry and to the internal market. Well, that leads me to the next point. We want to promote the single market. It has been said already before, in particular on net neutrality, it is of utmost importance that the industry faces consistent application of the rules across Europe, and we want to further promote this. Therefore, we will continue our ongoing net neutrality exchange, and I can really say that I have never seen such high level of cooperation in BEREC before on net neutrality. We take it very seriously. We are well aware of the fact that consistent application is of utmost importance, and no single NRA has the interest to execute the rules stricter or less strict than in other countries. So this is an important message, and we will drive that also in the future, and I think we are on a very good way to do so and to deliver. And of course, we will continue to do our monitoring and benchmarking work, which is indeed a very, very important contribution to promoting the single market. And I want to make a sidestep here. We are working on an open data platform so that you and the public can have access to the data we are gathering, and I think this could be also a very, very good contribution for higher transparency on the markets and a contribution to promoting the single market. And as I said before, and the open data platform will be one of the puzzle stones on this engagement with stakeholders. We will have an increased number of public consultations, and we will also introduce, as we have done this year already, two-stage public consultations so that stakeholders are on board during the whole process. And as I said already before, the dialogue with in EU institutional group and our international cooperation will be fostered. The last point on the international cooperation, we have received many input from the industry to enhance our international cooperation, for instance, with the FCC. There are some fields of common interest, like the 5G deployment, like maybe net neutrality, where many stakeholders are concerned that we are now diverging instead of converging. And there were also remarks that we should enhance our cooperation with the South American regulators, collectively very often referred to as Regulatel, a less structured body than we are in Europe, but still they are also ramping up their joint efforts, and they are very interested in an exchange with BEREC. So, once again, 5G, promoting the single market and enhancing the engagement with stakeholders will be our key focus areas for next year. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And I'm really happy to see the continuity that we have really tried to build together with Johannes during all the year. We have two other documents, that have been approved for publication, and you have the titles of this document here, and we have other documents published today that are on our website. We have also reports on the need to review the common positions on market 3A, 3B, and 4. Sorry for that, but it's, let's say, broadband and fiber markets. That should be adopted in P1, Plenary 1, in February or March next year. Thanks a lot for that. So just to summarize this year, I would like to very quickly come back to something that have been quite important for BEREC this year. It's the review, of course, the review of the framework and our contribution to the code. And so you remember that we have issued 13 technical papers to feed the legislator to find the good solutions to review this framework. And what I would like to say is, behind the review and with or without the review, what I would like to really insist on is that BEREC is really at the front edge of the political objectives, and that we have totally acknowledged the importance of connectivity, not only in our positions in the review, but in our concrete work streams. And I hope what have been presented today, both about 2017 but also about 2018, is a clear illustration of our ambition to be committed on that important topic. So in one word, I would say that this year have been very much committed to make BEREC connectivity ready, let's say. Connectivity ready regarding the work stream and especially the question of mobile connectivity that is really raising in our works, and also by feeding, of course, the legislative discussion. So just to finish with the picture, you know, generally I like to have a picture in my presentations. This is a picture I presented at a Net No conference, where what I wanted to say is that in these turbulent times of competition and OTTs and 5G and so forth, we needed, so you can see the ship that is a little bit the market, and we need, I guess, in these turbulent times to have a clear light on, and that the regulators can be that lighthouse. What I wanted to say today is that BEREC also have been in turbulent times this year, because I know that these technical inputs that we have provided have created a debate. And what I would like to say is that when we were this ship on the sea, you were our stakeholders, you were our lighthouse. I really would like to thank you for all your contribution, because as Johannes said, we regulators cannot be relevant without the inputs from the stakeholders. So I really would like to thank you for all the contribution you made, for all the questions you raised during this public debriefing, and all the nice questions you raised on Twitter, and I'm sure we will have good questions today also, all the contributions to the public consultation. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for all the teams in Riga, in Brussels, in Paris, everywhere. And it was a good time to work with you. I really loved this chairmanship. I'm really happy to hand over with Johannes. He will be a great chairman for BEREC. I'm really happy to give the keys of BEREC to him. And it was a pleasure to work with you this year. Thank you very much.
I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Sébastien, Mr. Soriano, for his work done in 2017. It was indeed a very turbulent year, a very decisive year as well for BEREC and for the whole ecosystem. And thank you very much, Sébastien, for your work, for your contribution, for your dedication to the work. And I'm very happy to have you on board in my mini board next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. And this make a great transition for something I forgot. It's about next year board and mini board and the chairmanship for 2019. This is something we have also to announce today. It's spoiled on Twitter or not? Not? No? Yes. Okay. So it's an official statement. Okay, but the information is already public. So I'm really happy to tell you that the chairmanship for 2019, so after next year, will be handled by Jeremy Godfrey, Commissioner of Irish regulator Comreg. So he has been elected for chairmanship for 2019, and next year Johannes Gungl in his team will count on board Georges Michaelides from OCE CPR, the Cyprus, the regulator from Cyprus, and Dan Sjöblom from PTS, the regulator from Sweden. So they have been elected as vice chairs together with myself and Jeremy Godfrey. And to represent the non-EU countries, we will have also on board Vladika from the regulator from Serbia. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I open the floor for questions.
Yes, good morning. My name is Friedrich de Bakker. I'm for Telefonica. I have first two questions, not on net neutrality. To Jonathan Duggan, on those indicators that you showed on the fixed and mobile. My question is are those indicators a kind of suggestion or just taking stock what is being measured by NRAs? Because I asked that when I saw, for instance, in the fixed, it says revenue from non-residential customers, which is not always easy, probably because you have a lot of small enterprises who just purchase their broadband connection as it were residential. So I just have one. Sorry. On the implementation of the broadband cost reduction report, you said that in most of the cases, operators could have agreement without the involvement of the dispute mechanism. My question is, was this always, or is it separated between disputes between operators and also telecom operators and infrastructure providers from other sectors? Or because perhaps that was more complicated, I know. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So I would say that you asked, are the indicators a suggestion? We circulated a questionnaire to all NRAs. We had 34 indicators in total across mobile and fixed. They were based on a collection and a kind of a discussion among a drafting team as to what are the general indicators that all NRAs are collecting on this sector. So the first question was, do you collect on the business sector? And then we kind of we broadened it a little bit to the non-residential sector. So they're not suggestions, they're definite indicators that we want to collect data on. And then the issue came down to the definition of non-residential customers. So we provided the definition that was put up on the screen, and we also gave some guidance so that when NRAs go back to operators like yourself, there can be a kind of a dialogue between the NRA and the operator as to where how that definition applies to the data that that the operator can provide to the NRA. So there's a little bit of scope, a little bit of room for maneuver between the operator and the NRA when reporting back to BEREC, reporting back to the Commission, actually. Does that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Daniel?
Yep. Regarding your question on the broadband cost reduction directive, I think it's a general trend observed by NRAs that operators and what we call network operators, being energy or transportation and so on, providers were able to reach agreement without the need for an NRA intervention in most cases. I think that the directive establishes general access principles on which the stakeholders have been able to build on to reach agreements in most cases. And of course, there are cases where this was not the case and where the NRA was led to intervene.
Tony Shorthold from Telage. I just had a couple of quick questions. So on the net neutrality report, and I understand that the specificities of different countries may differ, but just to ask Michel, did he identify any instances where there seemed to be different approaches happening in European countries? I see Sebastian shaking his head already. And then the second is just a comment on the broadband indicators, because I saw a Credit Suisse report which estimates, identifies, I think based on Eurostat data, just 15 to 35% increase in the number of units based on the residential units as what they identified throughout Europe. So if you've got 100% of residential units, you could have anything from 15 to 35%. So just point that out. Thanks.
So regarding the implementation of net neutrality, please complete, Michel, if needed. What we see regarding the technical part of net neutrality is that all the decisions taken by regulators are fully consistent, and we are exactly applying the same rules with the same results. When it comes to commercial practices, once again, it's a case-by-case analysis, and the regulation and more importantly, the guidelines from BEREC are providing a kind of cookbook about how to deal with it. So we have a common grid of analysis. And what we see is that this grid of analysis is perfectly respected by NRAs. What makes the image quite difficult to see is that regarding the fact that the offers from operators differ from one country to another, and that the national circumstances differ also, you may have the impression that we are taking different directions. But we are applying the same rules and the same guidelines. And Michel, I think that one important conclusion of the report is that we see a consistent implementation of the guidelines. I'm correct?
Yeah, I think overall you can say that. I think it's also true to say that we are still working on, as NRAs individually and also collectively, on further developing, especially the way to analyze, for example, zero rating cases. Because the guidelines, I think they offer a very good starting point for analyzing things. But of course, when you have an increasing volume of cases to apply them to, then you can see whether you can maybe tweak things or not, or well, we have discussions about these things in the working group. And I think so far we've not come we've not encountered big issues. Otherwise, we would have written that down. And maybe a specific example of different markets. Of course, zero rating is only interesting on the mobile market, and as you are aware of, some markets in Europe have 4G networks with unlimited offers on the market without a data cap. I think that gives a completely different context than when you have 2 mobile broadband networks or 2.5 that give allowances of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gigabytes for 30, 40 euros a month. So that is a completely different starting point, and the regulation asks of us to take these things into account. So if you would apply the exact same offer in these 2 example theoretical markets of mine, then it would not surprise you that in the one market it might be easier to digest such an analysis for an NRA than in the other market. And then another small thing, of course, we sometimes it's seemingly one offer, but for example, you indirectly mentioned Vodafone Pass. That is, in our understanding, not exactly the same in each country. So it seems to be one product which is marketed in one way, of course, but the actual implementation is different in different countries. So that is also that requires different analysis. Sorry.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for the question. I haven't seen the Credit Suisse report. But I think it's important that we're monitoring the sector, or begin to monitor the sector, because even though it's a difficult to define market, it is a different market with a different dynamic to the residential sector. So I think anything we can do to monitor it is worthwhile. So thank you.
Thank you. My name is Marianne Fernandez, and I work for European Data Rights Edry. Well, first of all, thank you very much for organizing this, and thank you for the commitment to ensure net neutrality. My questions would be in that regard. I actually have 3 questions. The first one, it's with regards to zero rating. So we see that there are several cumulative effects of comparable propositions on zero rating offers that is often ignored, and we see that the combination of each of those separate services collectively affects the functioning of the internet ecosystem as an engine of innovation, which was stated in the regulation. To change this image on zero rating in the future, if we don't see case law going into the right direction, we are wondering whether you would agree that perhaps the guidelines could be reviewed in the future, or do you expect that these problems will be resolved by case law? My second question regards the development of 5G and net neutrality. So how does BEREC plan to ensure that the development of 5G will comply with the net neutrality regulation? We hear concerns, but want to be reassured that BEREC will ensure net neutrality is respected when achieving 5G. The third question regards problems in terms of divisions of competences in some EU member states where no formal user complaint mechanism exists. I put an example. In Spain, there are several net neutrality irregularities that have been denounced by civil society, and they have complained both to the ministry and also to the NRA. They have follow-up by email and also by phone, and there seems to be no response to this. And so is there a way that BEREC can help in improving the channels to control and ensure the implementation of net neutrality, not only in Spain, but also in all relevant member states? Because in the example of Spain, for example, you have a very good regulator that is very much aware of the net neutrality rules, but cannot effectively enforce them because it's a competence of the ministry, but the ministry is not providing a meaningful mechanism to address these issues. Thank you very much. And finally, I would be interested if there could be a reply to some questions that have been done on Twitter on zero rating and traffic management. I think they're interesting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We will look at the Twitter question in the end. I will let Johannes, if you agree, answer on the 5G issue. So regarding the first one about how zero rating can affect the digital ecosystem, I mean, our system is sophisticated, but the objective, the aim of the regulation is clearly to make sure that we maintain internet as an open network, and that we make sure that the permissionless system that allows the internet is guaranteeing in the long run. So once again, I really ask you to look at our work in the long run. And today it would be not an objective statement to say that in Europe the digital ecosystem is threatened. I mean, so because we are watchdogs on this, and we are doing our duty. And once again, some cases are quite sophisticated, and it takes time. And especially, I don't know if you were. Because I know that there are questions about this also. If you were thinking at the Portuguese offer of Mio that have been buzzing a little bit on the internet, I mean, I really want to make clear that today there is no clearance decision about this. So this is under examination. And so it is too early to say whether this offer could deter innovation, blah blah blah. So please, we just ask a little time to really look at it. Once again, competition regulation has not been a one-day story, and we are working on this for 20 years. I'm not saying that net neutrality will take 20 years, but I mean it's a long-run process. Regarding the division of competencies, you know that BEREC has issued a clear statement in the frame of the review about the fact that the proposal from the Commission to have a common set of competencies for all independent regulators is something critical to make sure that we have an independent and EU consistent implementation of regulation over Europe. This is critical. And so it is clear that the fact that in several countries the distribution of competencies is not in line with the spirit of the directives, and the regulation raises potential problems. And this is something that should be solved in the frame of the review of the code, and so we have put clear arguments on that. But in the same time, I would like to be too alarmist about this, because if you look at the different competencies of NRAs over Europe, I mean, this is totally an exception. And a very vast majority of NRAs over Europe have clearly competencies on net neutrality and also on topics like spectrum allocation. So, I mean, there are very limited situations in Europe where there are concerns about this. And regarding the 5G, I give the floor to Johannes Gungl.
Thank you. Well, of course, we have a very high interest to ensure net neutrality also in the 5G context. On the other hand, we have a very high interest in a very quick and smooth rollout of 5G, that our citizens can benefit from this new technology. So we have heard that there are some concerns out there that say that some aspects of the 5G standard, i.e. network slicing, for instance, are in conflict with the existing net neutrality rules. What we have to do is to give technical input to legislators that they can make a proper decision on this political, societal issue of net neutrality. So it is our goal to give independence advice to the legislators, and they can handle the issue then, because we are only here to execute or to apply the rules. This is very important. We don't develop the rules. We are strictly bound to the rules that are in place.
Thanks a lot.
Good morning, Guillermo Beltrán from BEREC, the European Consumer Organization. First of all, thank you for organizing that. Thank you for the great work that BEREC has been doing as we put in our response to your consultation on the work program. A very ambitious plan ahead where you've considered the consumer angle in many of your strategic priorities, so thank you for that as well. I just wanted to quickly react to what Mr. Gungl was talking about now on 5G and a comment he made before, and then just ask a very short practical question. When you evaluate the EU rules on net neutrality, the goal, in my view, cannot be to identify whether there are hurdles to an upcoming technology. The main goal of your evaluation should be whether the regulation is achieving its own goals, which are to protect end-user rights, recital 1 of the own regulation, and to protect the internet as an ecosystem of innovation. Because if the goal is to just respond to concerns you hear from different stakeholders, you are also hearing concerns about whether this regulation is protecting the internet as an ecosystem of innovation through zero rating practices that we see, etc. So I think as a club of independent regulators, your input into whether the regulation is satisfying its own goal should be the main objective of your evaluation. And in doing that, you can see whether it is in conflict with upcoming trends, etc. But reasoning it the other way around precludes really the whole purpose of the evaluation and might lead you to conclude, this is in conflict. And I don't think that's please don't forget the public policy that this instrument pursues. That's just a comment. I had a question on the open data platform. Sorry, I had a question on the open data platform that was mentioned earlier. Just in practical terms, what is the timing? What kind of data will be included there? What can we expect to see there? Thank you.
maybe first on your concern on net neutrality. I think that's excellent point you raised. I think it is one aspect to evaluate if the regulation satisfies its own purpose. But it's also, I think, a second aspect, a little bit more forward-looking, whether or not there are troubles ahead, I would say. Yeah. You want to add something?
Thanks. If I may add on net neutrality and 5G, I think it makes sense as a regulator to look at a law that is 2 years old, to not as a thing that is distant past. So the objective of the regulation still applies for us, of course. I think in the debate about the relation between net neutrality and 5G, that requires a careful analysis of whether there are actually problems in terms of the idea of 5G and the idea of net neutrality. As a personally, I'm not convinced of, I have not seen well-argued substantial problems that with a reasonable application of the regulation cannot be taken away. So I've not seen things of 5G that would be essential to 5G, which are inherently violating the regulation, because the legislator, as you know, anticipated innovation, and it anticipated what probably your focus is on, the relevance of a well-developed internet access service. So I would like to stay away with this binary thing that it's either or. I don't think it's either or.
Just one extra word about 5G.
Sorry.
One extra word about 5G. We are now in a good discussion with people involved in that, and especially we had the first discussion with the GSMA about 5G and net neutrality, and this is very positive, because something I've been regretting very much is a document, I'm sorry to come back to this, the 5G, so-called 5G Manifesto, that was very theoretical and very lobbying document saying that BEREC was a terrible institution that was about to kill 5G. And I think this is not the good way to work together. And so, as Johannes Gungl said, we are totally innovation friendly, and I'm sure, and as Michel said, there is no clear opposition between net neutrality and 5G today. So let's discuss this, on a rational basis, and this is exactly the mindset we are now, and I'm really happy about this. And maybe on the open data platform, Johannes, or?
Yep, thanks for the question. So the process is that at the first plenary next year in March, we plan to present a feasibility study on 3 options. The 3 options generally are a big bang option, as in a new BEREC open data portal, or to use a current portal that we have for information sharing, the information sharing portal whereby we upload reports from NRAs and from BEREC as well. And the third alternative is to use the EU open data portal, which we've been in discussion with the colleagues on that already. So that will be, the feasibility study will be presented in March. The earliest we envisage something probably by later next year, so towards the end of next year, and that's probably the earliest that something could come to fruition. In terms of the data, we're starting with the reports that BEREC produces and publishes. We're going to circulate a questionnaire to all of the co-chairs of the nine expert working BEREC, the expert working groups of BEREC, to see what data is used and what data they think could be uploaded to this portal when it comes about. And obviously we'll take into account issues with respect to confidentiality as well. So the data that's going to start it will be the data that is in BEREC reports, and making that public and more easily accessible and usable by consumers or anybody who wants to access it. Okay, thank you.
Johannes Theis, German Broadband Association, BRECO. Two very brief questions, 2 procedural ones. You mentioned the report on the Broadband Cost Reduction Directive. I just quickly checked on the website, is it published yet? If not, when will you publish it? Are you still in the drafting stage? Could you just clarify once again where you are with that report? And second question, you mentioned a consultation on access to physical infrastructure and market analysis. What is the background of that consultation? Is it more S&P related, symmetrical related, both? Is there an issue coming up? And when will that consultation be launched? Many thanks.
Just to be sure, the first report you've been mentioning is the one... Yeah, so yes, this will be published today if it's not already online. And on the market analysis, so yes, it's, as you may know, BEREC has issued a number of common positions on the broadband and the fiber markets in the context of S&P regulation. Those common positions focus on remedies imposed on those markets. And we have been conducting a work this year to analyze whether those common positions were still fit for purpose or whether we needed to adjust them. So we are in the process of finalizing this work, and it will be published at the first plenary next year. No, because it's basically descriptive analysis, but I think that in the coming stages there might be a discussion with stakeholders and public, but not at this stage.
Good morning, Francesco Versace from Vodafone. I moved to a different topic. It's the cooperation with the Indian regulator. I see you've been discussing future work on OTT rules, among other things. I wanted to ask if you foresee any additional activity on top of what's already been done by BEREC in this area, and which kind of future work in general you envisage.
I think you're referring to our cooperation with TRI, I guess. Yeah. With TRI, we are really focused on net neutrality today, and there is no clear objective to go further, at least at this time. And regarding BEREC, so as I mentioned, one of the 5 strategic priority for BEREC in the 3 coming years is about looking at the bottlenecks. In the digital ecosystem broader than the narrow telecom approach. So we have this year issued the first report on contents and devices, and next year there will be a report on data economy in the work program. But obviously it's more about looking at what happens and taking possibly actions like monitoring things, but not there is no further actions, and at least clearly there is no legal framework today for regulators to regulate OTT anyway. So the only question about OTT, you know, is in the frame of the review, where several OTT that are offering equivalent services than the telecom would enter into the framework, but I have no specific news to tell you about this. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Magnus Franklin from MLEX. One quick question on net neutrality, which is whether in your discussions among the regulators last week, if there is any indication that any of the disputes are ones that will end up in the European Court of Justice, if any regulators have proposed to a court to ask questions to the ECJ for referral, etc. So quick clarification on that. And also, since you mentioned the code, maybe for Johannes, are you envisaging engaging further in the decision-making process on the code as trilogues progress, or are you hands-off from here on?
Thanks, Magnus. I'm aware of one pending court case, and I'm not aware of the issue of asking questions to the European Court of Justice is addressed there. So yeah, I think it's something we can maybe see some development on later this year or next year. Well, this year's finished, so next year. Yeah, but it's a matter of time, I guess.
Okay, and on the code, let's find a diplomatic answer. We are not part of the trilogue, but we are standing ready to give technical advice if needed, I would say.
Okay, I suggest we go to the Twitter questions. Jérôme.
Yes, it's working. Maybe one first question we received by email from Dougie Stanford, European correspondent at Warren Communication News. The question is the following: if, as expected, the FCC reverses its position on net neutrality, what effect, if any, might that have on Europe's stance? Are member states likely to consider taking the same course as the US? Also, how do multinational companies doing business in the US and EU negotiate different net neutrality regimes?
Thank you. So on the first question, I think the answer is very clear. And I would like to thank Vice President Ansip for the very clear statement he had in an opinion published, I guess, in several papers this morning, but in particular in Le Monde in France. I guess it's a publication in several languages. So the Vice President Ansip is clear about the fact that there is a long-term commitment on net neutrality in Europe. I mean, one important difference between the United States and Europe when it deals with net neutrality is the legal and institutional setup. I mean, why net neutrality rules are changing every 2 years in the United States? Because it's in the hands of the regulator, and the regulator doesn't have the independence, the guarantees in terms of independence at the same level in Europe. In Europe, it's a completely different story. It's the political people with a broad consensus between the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council that decided to have net neutrality rules. And I'm sure that the rules are here for a very long time. And so the idea of reopening a discussion about withdrawing net neutrality rules would be totally absurd, and it is really not on the table when I read at Mr. Ansip's paper. So I'm really happy with this very clear statement, which is, I hope, closing a debate before it opens in Europe about this. I think that we need long-term rules, because the most important thing that we need to face the investment challenge in Europe is to have not rules that don't change every year or every 2 years. We have a long-term framework. It's a good one. It's delivering. So let's be cool on that. I really advocate for not taking decisions in looking only on the other side at the Atlantic. As you see, if you look at the other side of the Indian Ocean, you see the biggest democracy in the world that is taking very ambitious rules regarding net neutrality. So thank you very much, Mr. Ansip, for this clear statement. Regarding multinationals that are possibly facing different regimes, I think that the most important is that we have the same regime at European level. So we are a continent on this issue, and this is the most important. What would be a pity would be that we would have, if we would have national different approaches in EU regarding net neutrality, it would be a pity, but it is not the case. So I think that multinationals and most importantly startups can face with no difficulty the European regime. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes, we got other questions. One is on the implementation report, and the other one on the launch of the net neutrality measurement tool. The first one is from Simon Kai. Did ISPs divert from NN before the implementation of open internet regulation took place? And there is a second question on the net neutrality measurement tool from Thomas Luninger. When you say an important issue of traffic management is degradation of ABR video streaming, why does the current plan for the BEREC measurement tool does not contain this or other application-specific measurement to help NRAs to fulfill their mandate?
Thank you. On the first question, the question essentially asks what went wrong before the regulation was implemented. And in 2012, BEREC issued a report where we found that between 20 and 36% of the internet access services were faced with blocking or throttling of services. So I think that was the starting point of the political debate in Europe. On the second question on whether it's useful to measure throttling of videos in the tool, I think it could be, but we have not finalized the tender documents. So I can't say at this time whether it will be in or out. What I can say is that the tool is always going to be something that gives indications about whether there's a good practice or a practice that should be analyzed. And so the broader picture is always that the NRA has to analyze what is happening. And currently, I think we see that, for example, on video throttling, this is not something we have to find out because it's not done secretly. At least I've not encountered situations where it's done secretly, but sometimes it's done, or I think until now it's been done publicly. So it was in the terms of practice. So there's no technical tool necessary to find this as an NRA. You can just look at the internet.
Thanks a lot. Giving the fact that we are a little bit late regarding the initial agenda, I propose we close the public debriefing. Thank you very much for your attention and your questions. And once again, thank you for the good work done together. And good luck to Johannes.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.